Well, I'm thrilled to announce our next guest, as he was one of my earliest mentors in my integrative health education. Reed Davis is a double board certified holistic health practitioner, certified nutritional therapist, best-selling author, and popular expert in functional lab testing and holistic lifestyle medicine. He's also the founder of the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Certification course with over 4,000 graduates in 50 countries. Getting his start in a chiropractic office, Reed quickly knew he wanted to be the last practitioner someone needed to see. He was the health director and case manager at Wellness Center in Southern California for over 10 years, where he reviewed thousands of labs with thousands of clients and made important discoveries that are now part of the FDN methodology. Welcome, Reed.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jason.
Always good to chat with you. I
Oh,
love the fact that you were kind of a big entryway into the integrative health world. For me, I can't say enough about FDN, especially for those who are trying to figure out where to start in integrative and functional medicine. It is such a foundational understanding. And it was amazing back when I took it, which was at this point, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or something. It was crazy. And I know it's only gotten better. You continue to make better and better changes, making the course better, making the business side better. So again, thanks for everything you've done for me. And I'm so excited to have you on today.
my pleasure to be here. Always trying to help people.
You coined this term that I love called metabolic chaos. Maybe that's a good place to start to kind of ground in the discussion we're going to have today, because oftentimes people get siloed into thinking, okay, I know I've got some digestive or gut health stuff, so the problem must be in the gut, or I've got hormonal imbalances, so the problem must be with my hormones. But when you kind of talk about metabolic chaos, what does that really mean to you, and how can we use that to kind of start this conversation?
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's usually where we sort of end the conversation. But let me start there. This is a great idea. So I started in a clinic running lab work. That was my introduction to the functional health space. It wasn't even called that. We were called alternative health back then in the 1999. So a long time ago. I was in my mid to late 40s, and I was looking to help people, having come from environmental loss. So a lot of what we suffer from is all that environmental stress that you and I were talking about earlier.
Mhm.
And it affects everyone differently. So you have all of these different types of stress, and the body starts to break down. And now what happens, people usually go and they get a diagnosis from a doctor. Well, I wasn't a doctor, which worked out to our advantage because I couldn't diagnose and treat anything specifically. Matter of fact, when I started at the clinic, they said, that's our job, Reed, the doctor said. Your job is to find out what's really wrong with them. You know,
Yeah.
like you can't diagnose and treat one thing. Just so see if you what you can do. So I spent 10 years, as you mentioned, running thousands of labs on thousands of people. And I just sort of uncovered all of these healing opportunities that everyone needs to know about. So we run the labs, and the the one thing I know for sure is that there's no one root cause
Hmm.
anybody's problem. You come in with a complex, whatever the diagnosis is, and all these things going on, the different effects of stress and modern day living, and your body can only handle so much of that. So the term metabolic chaos just became the most accurate description of what's going on in a person. There's no one diagnosis. If there was, that would be what I would call it, you know. And so it's just really fascinating how people's bodies break down in a almost very reliable pattern. You know, so we run all the labs, look at the entire cycle of, well, first of all, trial and error that people are going through, but the body breaks down from stress and it ends up at the gut. You mentioned, you know, a lot of people say all disease begins in the gut. No, it doesn't, but it circles around to it so commonly that it's looked at that way. But so metabolic chaos was a term to describe the fact that there are always multiple causal factors. So there's multiple healing opportunities. And here's the other thing you don't hear much, Jason, is they're having an effect on each other.
There we go. That's the big piece right
So
there.
you've got the causal factors, whether it be mental, emotional, psychospiritual, physical trauma, chemical, environmental, everything that's we're all the signals, and then you have chaos, and we just call it metabolic chaos. But again, you can sort it out by looking at those healing opportunities, identify those, and try to treat them all at the same time.
I love what you're saying here because this is it's a common thing when I work with clients. It's a common thing when I was trying to solve my own health issues is you're looking for that one thing. What is it? I tried this, it didn't work. I looked at that, didn't really find anything. So you're always kind of looking for the thing. And
Yeah.
eventually what I realized is exactly what you're saying, that there's first of all, there's a whole history, right? So it could have
Oh yeah.
started with a traumatic brain injury, a head injury, a concussion, right? Which led to all kinds of gut stuff happening, right? Which led to, kind of some liver metabolic stuff going on there.
Mm,
And also hormones start to get out of whack. So by the time somebody goes to see you or any kind of practitioner, what we have at that point is metabolic chaos. We're no longer saying, oh, well, it was the head injury. Let's just fix that and everything will be fine now. No, there's all these downstream effects that have occurred. And now we've got to repair. An analogy I like to give is, a house fire starts, right? And it's so bad, the fire department comes. And of course, they take their hoses and they're spraying down the house. Well, the fire was the big issue here. And now we have everything's wet too, right? So now we have
yeah.
kind of this. So we got to get rid of the drywall because it's wet, and so we have all this stuff that's happened because of the sort of healing effects, if you will.
Yeah.
So it's not just the thing that started the problem. We've got all this stuff now that happens, and so working with that, it starts to become okay, as you mentioned, healing opportunities. Really,
Right.
really fun. Like this is a big shift in some people's thinking, I think, is
Yes.
what are the opportunities that I have to provide support to the body, to provide to help nourish and to help the body recover because it knows how to do it. It just may need some help, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and one thing that occurred to me is you were very accurately defining all the stressors having multiple effects on a person, creating healing opportunities. Things go out of balance in the
Yeah.
hormones, in the immune system, digestion, detoxification, and so on. Um, and if you try to single one out, just fix that, it's going to be affected by all these other inputs. So you really need to look at as big a picture as possible. We say identify the whole constellation of healing opportunities. And one more thing on that, the original stressor, this is something I think we always knew around our place, but recently study came out of University of California, San Diego says the original stressor doesn't even have to be there anymore.
Yeah. This is a huge one. This is,
This is
I mean,
huge.
it's
So
it's
we don't know
wild.
what caused it. You're looking for a root cause. It isn't there anymore. But the
Yeah.
downward spiral that it created is still in effect. And so it's a really interesting construct, this idea of metabolic chaos. And hey, what you need is a system. And that's obviously what we created.
Yeah, I've seen this a lot with like mold might be a good example because it can sort of be easily defined sometimes in somebody that has a mold infection or they have mold in their house. They clean up the mold in the house. There's no signs of mold infection in the body anymore, and yet the nervous system is still skewed. The gut is still imbalanced, right? There's still that chaos. It's like a residue. It's like this echo of the issue is still being held in the body. And this is actually quite common in the nervous system. Again, I mentioned head injuries before, emotional trauma. When the nervous system is conditioned to a stress response, it kind of gets stuck or adapted or conditioned into that response. And to get it out sometimes can take a little bit of nudging, if you will, right? So there's always opportunities. I love that you bring that up. When you run your tests, you mentioned you run a suite of tests to kind of get a big picture of what's going on. Just give me I know there's a lot of markers that you guys run, but
Sure.
generally speaking, what are the systems that you're looking at to try to tie the picture together?
Well, you'll remember from the training, and not a lot is changed. The labs change, and the world's gotten actually more complicated. And we are
Yeah.
taking more into consideration, such as the echoes, as you mentioned, might be just sort of energetic, instead of like the one echo I think of, or a way of looking at with mold. and you clean up the mold, but the toxins are actually still circulating. Your
Got
body
it.
can almost never get rid of them. It takes a long time, perhaps. And so that's one sort of echo or memory of what, but those are actual toxins that are there, and they do affect the nervous system. Some are neurotoxic, some work on other areas. So, but the energetic ones can be even more interesting, let's say. And that's an area that I know you explored a lot after
Yeah.
FDN. So things just keep expanding in the healing opportunities we look for. But keeping it, trying to keep it simple and back to basics. We always look at the hormones, but not always the sex hormones right away. You look at catabolic, anabolic, cortisol, DHEA. So people would best understand this as the catabolic and anabolic hormones. So your body breaks down and builds up naturally every single day. And so one is controlled by the catabolic hormone, cortisol mostly, and then there's the anabolic counter-regulatory hormone, DHA. So if we just look at that and we see you're out of balance, you're more catabolic, your body is breaking down. You are getting older before your time, and it could affect everything from mental state, mental clarity, fogging it to energy, to skin, to libido. I mean, just every kind of thing is affected by this getting older before your time. And it's all the stressors. They throw you out of balance. You can measure that. It's the first domino we look at. From there, the dominoes fall towards the other sex hormones. So when you say hormone testing, people think, oh, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Those are important, but they're the next domino. They're not the first domino. They're the second domino. And what falls behind that would be the immune system. So secretory IgA in the gut, highly affected by this catabolic state. So now you don't have as good an immune system, and you get dysbiotic. And so these are the next dominoes. So now you can look at, oh, secretory IgA, it's low, your mucosal barriers thinning out, not as protective. So you get this imbalance in good and bad flora, which affects digestion, which affects breakdown of proteins, which produce amino acids, which produce neurotransmitters. So now you're feeling sad. So not only now do you have your energy problems, your catabolic getting old before your time, your immune system isn't good, you got digestive issues, and that could just have its own set of symptoms: the heartburn, gas, indigestion, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, or the famous alternating diarrhea, constipation. And on top of that, you're not digesting your food, so you're not even getting the right nutrients, neurotransmitters, and it makes you sad.
Yeah.
So, and I don't mean to be laughing, but I'm laughing at the predictability. It's so predictable that as we look at the test results, we see the dominoes falling. And by the way, and that's all mild stuff. It just gets worse from there as you end up with that mucosal barrier getting so thin, you end up with the leaky gut and food sensitivities and parasites and bacteria and funguses and biofilms, and on and on and on. So we have observed over 25 years how the dominoes fall, and that's the only way to sort out metabolic chaos. Otherwise, yeah, it's all these things. Well, no, let's do a logical progression. Let's do the whole suite of tests, as you say, and assess each person individually. That's the only way to go about it, our opinion.
I love what you're saying here because, oftentimes we end up with, let's say, parasites, or we have heavy metals, or we have excess chemicals that we can test for in various testings. And it sounds like to me what you're saying is there's a couple things upstream of that set the stage for that possibility, right?
Right.
It's when we lose our mucosal lining, our immunological barriers, our ability for the gut to do what it knows how to do, and our hormonal system to keep us in balance, we are more ripe for the accumulation of some of these toxins and metals and parasites that are always in our environment. Unfortunately, that's the reality we live in. So we're really reliant on our body systems to help keep everything in check so we don't get to that state.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why the behavior that is the offshoot, if you will. I studied lab testing. I ran thousands of labs and thousands of people. And people were coming in our wellness center for various treatments and modalities and things. And I would say to some of them, over 20 years ago, hey, you're doing a great job. You're coming in for your chiropractic and acupuncture and consultations and other modalities that we had there, massage and the different things. But what are you doing at home? And so what they were doing at home became more important to me than coming in the office. And that's where the Dress for Health Success program came from. It was eating right and going to bed on time and
Yeah, maybe cover
exercising.
that. If I'm very
Yeah.
familiar with the
Yeah.
DRESS acronym. It's fantastic. You drill it into us as students, and rightly so. And the order's important, right? So give people an idea of what that dress means.
Yeah, sure. Again, this was, you come in the office, we run labs, we do treatment, whatever it is. When you go home, that's where all the healing occurs. It's not going to happen in the office. It's going to happen on through day to day proper, we call it behaviors or habits and things like that. So the system that evolved was DRESS, diet. We use metabolic typing still, but you can check for food sensitivities and get rid of the bad things in your diet. So diet and rest, which is beyond just sleep, that's important. But diet, rest, exercise, sitting's the new smoking and all that stuff. But you can over exercise too. I have
But
some funny stories about people who over exercise. And me, I'm 71, man, and I don't can't do even up until my 60s. I was doing things that I just had to sort of gracefully back away from, like jujitsu, competitive, you just get hurt and you can't recover. So you can't exercise is not the same for everybody. Diet's not the same for everyone. Even your rest program, the exercise program says DRE. SS is stress reduction, which is a whole show, and supplementation, which we know a few things about. It's to support and stimulate and help people self-treat and things like that. So the DRESS is really our methodology. The methodology includes the lab work, figuring out what's really wrong, where the healing opportunities are. But how do you fix it? You have to live yourself out of the problems you've lived yourself into. If because almost all disease now is lifestyle based. It's not infectious. You're not catching your diabetes from your neighbor.
Yeah, no, I 100%. Like this is the reality. On a positive note, this is a very empowering message, right? Is that we actually have the capacity to shift all of these things. And I love what you're saying that it's all individualized. So we often hear, okay, yeah, diet and sleep and exercise, these are important. But what you're saying is diet. Find the right diet for you given your current context, right? Like this is a really important thing to recognize. You guys use metabolic typing. There might be other systems, of course. Ayurveda has their own system, but the key, and you might even have your own intuitive grasp if you're really, really in tune with your body. That's fantastic. But the point is the same. Find the diet that is right for you. If you
Yeah.
start to really tune in, or you run certain tests and you figure out that certain foods are creating an inflammatory process in you, then it's best to avoid those foods at least for now, if not for the long term, right? So it's really finding the diet, and along with that, right? It's when to eat, right? Like that
Yeah.
this is it's not just eat the good foods as much as you want all day long, right? Like that creates as much metabolic chaos as anything else, right?
Yes. Yeah. Consuming calories and burning them creates waste, and you can do it wrong. We go even before that, though, and sort out what's going to allow your cells to produce energy at the right rate, quality, and quantity. So just getting the protein, fat, and carb ratios right and all clean. And it's complicated ever so slightly by the fact that there's no one diet or food right for everybody.
Yeah.
There's foods that are bad for everybody, and that's good to know what those are. Other than that, we do an assessment. We figure out the oxidative rate and autonomic balance and things like that are manageable. So
Yeah.
you can give people and teach them how to know if it's the right diet. It's not here's the right diet for you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
how will you know if this is the right diet in terms of energy and satiation, sense of well-being, and things like that.
Yeah, and which is why so many people get so confused with diet, right? Because they're listening to various gurus out there tell them which foods are good for them, and the reality is nobody can tell you what's good for you unless you do some testing and or you work with your own constitution, right? Like that's the real important factor.
Yes.
Rest is a critical one, right? And this is actually ties into some of the work that I did with the blue zones and the longevity regions. One of the biggest contrasts that I saw when you go to these when you go to Ikaria, Greece, and you're hanging out with these people in these small villages, there it's almost like rest is built into their lifestyle. And paradoxically, they're moving more. So it's
Yeah.
not about sitting, as you mentioned, right? With the exercise thing, it's actually their mind is more at rest, right? There's actually an aspect of reduced stimulation. So you can be moving your body and still be more at rest than we are sitting here today, right? Like this
Yes.
is it's the paradox I think that we find ourselves in the West, which is that we are sitting more, we are more stationary, and we don't rest as much, which is totally bizarre.
California is not exactly considered a blue zone, but
Yeah.
I kind of create, because I live out in the country and I work from early in the morning. I usually start at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, but by 1 o'clock I'm done. So that gives me the whole beautiful afternoon to go out in the garden. And I love what you just said. It makes me think, yeah, I am so relaxed when I'm out in the garden. And I have some acres and I've planted over 2,000 succulents and I nurture them and make it very pretty and thing. I do landscape design and growing, and it's so relaxing, even though you're really active.
Yeah.
I'm out there lifting big rocks and stuff. I have a tractor and all these things, but you're working physically, but you're not stressed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes, there was, I forgot who it was, but I think it was a gentleman, 90 something year old in Sardinia, I believe. He said the difference when I was a kid, that the mind, the body was busy and the mind is still. Today, what I see is that the mind is busy and the body is still, right?
Oh,
And
great
I
one.
thought, like, what a brilliant like statement and so well said, right? Like it's
Yeah,
exactly the problem that we find ourselves in, and it speaks to this idea of not being able to rest, right? The E, exercise. This is an interesting one, right? Because again, individualized, right? Really important to say individualized. And I found myself, even though I'm still relatively young, I've crossed 40. I'm noticing that I'm not 20 anymore, and
yeah,
I'm starting to shift my exercise practices, right? I'm still doing some intense things, but not as much. My volume has now shrunk a little bit. I'm doing
yeah,
more mobility. I'm doing more movement-based things in ways that I think will serve me in the long term, right? So
yes,
exercise, you mentioned the CrossFit kind of craze is a perfect example, and the marathon runners and the triathlon people, these are the ones are kind of get into the over exercising or have the risk of over exercising. Talk to me about this idea, because we
oh,
want to
sure.
push the body, right, is in a way that's going to create this hormetic effect. And also, in order to realize hormetic effects, we also need the ability to recover, right? So talk to me about
Yeah.
exercise and how you work that into your program.
Oh, sure. Well, it's required to be healthy, but beyond that, um, it's individualized and it depends what your goals are. So what I noticed right away when I started all this lab work and testing everybody for everything, sorting out a program, is that the real fit people weren't that healthy.
Mm,
So they came in looking fit, gym freaks, muscle guys, and women too who were over doing their aerobics and even yoga and stuff. They're coming in hurt, because of they hurt themselves in the gym or doing so. So and when you ran the labs on their hormones and their immune system and digestion, they weren't doing any better than anyone else hardly because they were generally over exercising or getting hurt while exercising. And so you want to do the right amount of stretching and strengthening. Being strong is really important. You know, you want strong muscle. You want to keep core strength, I think. That's why I still do Pilates. And, you know, I was doing Pilates for many years, and I didn't start doing jujitsu, and I did kickboxing a lot, and I ended up tearing a rotator or a labrum in my right hip, you know, so you can really hurt yourself, and it can come around to haunt you later
Yeah.
by doing some of these extreme things. But anyway, with the younger people, I was wrestling at 60, 22-year-olds and 30-year-olds and 35-year-old. Some of them were cops and like these people, and they could not believe how strong I was.
Well, there's this old man strength. Okay. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
a
you
thing. I
just
don't
got
know
this.
what it is.
They could not believe. I mean, even the biggest, toughest guys, like you're not supposed. He's struggling, you know, and I just kind of maintaining my spine. So you're not supposed to be this strong, you know. It's from core strength. It's from
Yeah.
doing. So being strong is really important, and you only get that one way by keeping your body moving and doing things to challenge yourself a little bit. But you don't have to build up these huge. Matter of fact, it's extra work. Joe Rogan, who's a great, you know, UFC commentator, looks at the big muscular guys and says they're going to get tired because they got to keep blood supply to all the muscle and all. And
And,
sure,
when, and even in the aging world, right? We know
yes,
that it's not the big, tall, muscular guys that live a long time. And my theory is that in order to keep all those that tissue alive takes a lot of work from the vital organs like the heart, the brain, the liver, et cetera. And so
yes,
what we find actually in the longevity research is it's the tiny people, it's the smaller people,
hmm,
and that actually tend to live longer, right? So
yes.
strength, it's this again, it's kind of this balance where we want strength, absolutely critical for bone health, for immune system, for not falling, right? Very, very critical aspect. And yet the idea of getting huge and bulky and big really doesn't seem to serve.
Like you don't see 6'4", 280-pound people living to 100 years
No,
old. There
no.
aren't any.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing too with the exercise, you know, when you mentioned earlier catabolic and anabolic, right? If we've got somebody that's in this catabolic dominant state, right? In other words, the cortisol's pretty elevated, DHEA, the anabolic side isn't keeping up. The last thing we want to do is add more stress, right? So even though
Hmm.
we recognize exercise is a beneficial stress to some degree, that hormetic point is so it's not there. It doesn't take much, right? When we have somebody that's tipped over into catabolic state, they can't handle a lot of exercise. So when that person seems like some of the lighter movements, the qigongs, the a little bit of like yin yoga, so the softer yogas, walking, some of these things might be a little bit more beneficial. And if we're going to work in some resistance training, probably got to keep it, somewhat minimal until we get that anabolic catabolic balance in better check. Does that sort of ring true for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a balance for everybody. And if you want to, you need to be challenged, but
Yeah.
you don't need to overdo it. You know, so um, one of the most important and I think overlooked aspects of exercise is the cardiopulmonary. So they say the difference between an old guy and a young guy is not how strong you are. It's what kind of breath you have. Do you have the ability to run across the street to save a kid? You know, has your heart been there and done that before? So going supra aerobic could also be really important. That means sprinting. So it isn't being able to run for 10 miles. Matter of fact, those people don't live a long
Yeah.
time. It's the ones who you intermittently would work sprinting because you want to go to where you're out of breath. So if you go to where you're out of breath, then your heart's going to work harder, connecting with the lungs to oxygenate your blood and things like that. So the progressively accelerating cardiopulmonary exertion kind of concept, you know, like do some sprints. You
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
want to be in shape. You don't have to run on a treadmill for 8 hours a day. You know, you could just do some sprints. And same thing with your other working out. You know, you can do it. You want to
Yeah.
stress yourself out, but not that much. You got to
Yeah. This
return
is
to
this is
normal.
this is great. And just to kind of round this out, so it's clear for everyone. There's when somebody has this catabolic dominant state, right? If we have a lot of metabolic chaos, a lot of stress, we have a lot of symptoms showing up. The last thing we want to do is be working out for a long time. It's not about the duration, right? Doing a lot of CrossFit, doing a lot of long distance running, not the greatest thing. Instead, we want to do the soft, easy stuff like walking, and then we want to do short bouts of intense stuff, right? So
Yeah.
sprinting on a bike. I love using the bicycle for this. So at the gym, I set the bicycle at a pretty strong resistance, and I sprint on the bicycle for 30 seconds to a minute as hard as I can with
You're
some
right.
resistance. And I mean, it just completely wears me out. And it's very easy on the body too. So I'm not pounding. And so if sprinting may not be your thing, you can use something like that to really push the system. And when you push the system super hard for 30 seconds to a minute, or we do some kind of, let's say, push-ups or even lunges, and you're really going at it, and you're pushing yourself to the max, it doesn't take very long. That's the cool thing, right? So, and the research shows that when we do this high intensity interval like training, Tabata is another form of this, we actually can increase these anabolic hormones, right? Like that's the cool thing. There's a natural way to boost these things like testosterone, DHEA, to help offset. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, I guess. But the trick is you want to do these short bouts of hard stuff. And then the long duration is where we start to increase cortisol. So if we're running marathons or 7 mile runs and we don't have a lot of gas in the tank, we're going to exacerbate that catabolic side and the body's going to break down faster.
Yeah, remember, cortisol is it's the catabolic hormone, but it also helps regulate blood sugar a lot. But it's an anti-inflammatory and it's a painkiller. And so people who are running for 26 miles, um, that has to hurt. So your body's going to, it's in the way it doesn't hurt. I feel fine when I do. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on, but your cortisol is so high to reduce pain. Its job is to reduce inflammation and pain, among other things. And so but it also breaks you down in a way. That's why a lot of runners look much older than they really are. And it isn't just the sun that they're out in the sun. It thins the skin and does all kinds of things that you don't want.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love your.
Or
I think the hit training you mentioned, the high intensity interval training, is the way to go for longevity.
yeah,
You can't just not do anything. You have to exercise, but um, going to the gym for 3 hours on a treadmill doesn't do it really in the long run. It's counterproductive.
totally. And then not to mention the things that we love doing, right? Like you love gardening, right? So there's also a difference in some of this stuff where when you're doing something you love, you can do it for longer and it doesn't seem to induce the same, catabolic effects. Like it's really wild. If I'm playing with my dog or my son, right? Or if I'm gardening or if I'm doing anything that I'm truly in love with, um, in a playful way. I would say a playful way because I
Yeah,
know people could say I love running marathons, but that's a different thing than doing some of these playful activities, right? Like
It,
playing
it is
games.
it is playful. It's like being a kid again,
Yeah,
when you have to come home, and to eat, or be home by dark,
yeah,
because
totally.
and you're having so much fun, even if it's productive and work like,
Yep.
it's the same point of view as so now my mom doesn't yell at me to come in, my wife does.
And you still don't listen, so I know how it goes.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'm on my way.
Last one, and perhaps one of the more important ones that we can talk about is stress reduction. All of the things we've actually mentioned are in that sort of same realm, right? Like everything that you really teach is how do we reduce that stress load on the body and mind. What are some things you'd like to give people just with regard to managing stress?
Well, we sorted out first what are the stressors. It could be, depends on the person, but you realize that there are mental emotional stressors. That's what people think about. They don't like their job or their relationships or finances or whatever it is. You got kids in college and things like that. So people look at stress as being all mental, emotional. We've already mentioned that some of the stressors don't even have to be there anymore.
Right.
And then there's what I call psycho-spiritual, not having a purpose, wandering around aimlessly. Believe it or not, it's stressful. It makes your mind work harder than it would ordinarily have to if you have a good purpose. So the mental, emotional, psycho-spiritual seems to be all in the head. But I personally have suffered from physical stress. The stressors of torn labrum in my right hip is it's really stressful, and your body responds the same. It's the high cortisol. It's a stressor, and it doesn't go away unless you deal with that pain or whatever it is. So I've had both shoulders, my neck at least 3 times, my low back done twice, my left knee, my right hip, so with like stem cells and PRP and things to fix my well-used body up. That's another form of stress. Walking around in pain is just no good, no fun at all. And then there's the chemical stress, which is so ubiquitous, and it's one of the least recognized. You don't realize how bad the air and water and what's in the food and what's allowed in the food in this country is atrocious,
Mhm.
in a way. We don't need to go into all that. But when I talk about stress reduction, when an FDN practitioner, it's really a whole comprehensive, all the inputs. It's the environment, your life, and your body all together. So how do we sort that out? Well, we run tests. Look, a parasite, a bacteria, a fungal overgrowth it's just another form of stress from our point of view, because it could be handled, it could be eliminated or reduced or whatever it might be. So stress reduction could be called stress management, but um, getting your life together, getting a purpose, and then taking care of your body and things like that. Even just getting on off the wrong foods and on the right foods is a form of stress reduction. So with the DRESS, diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, supplementation, by getting on the right diet, you're actually handling two different things.
Right.
You don't realize how stressful that crappy diet is. So you get a lot of bang for your buck when you look at food sensitivities, which we test for and things like that. It's quite huge.
Yeah, I love it. And again, we'll leave supplementation as the last piece and kind of leave it untouched because the whole point is it's individualized, right? And it's the last piece. So the biggest headway we can make is focusing on those 4 points. And FDN is a fantastic way to do it. And before we wrap up here, I'll just say to anybody watching this, FDN is not only a course that anybody can take to get trained and learn how to do what Reed's talking about from a practitioner standpoint. You can also go through it as a client. So you can go through it to get some help with these things if you're looking for assistance in your own health journey, right? So you get
Well,
to
thanks,
learn
man.
it
Yeah.
while you getting help with it, right? Like that's a really cool thing because it helps you become empowered in the process.
Absolutely right. And in summary of that, to work on others, you need to work on yourself.
Yeah.
We call it walking the talk. And so people are more inclined to listen to you if you're actually doing what you're practicing, what you preach, so to speak. So everybody who goes through the FDN course as a practitioner works on themselves too. It's the only way to really learn the lab work. There's a lot of anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry involved, but it's more the practical, experiential side of it that where the lights start to go on and click for you. Like, yeah, this actually works, man. So
Totally.
that alone is worth the price of admission if you
Agreed.
just
Agreed.
worked on yourself.
And then of course, once you kind of graduate from there and you're working with clients, then you continue to cut your teeth time and again because you're working with cases that are outside of yourself and finding new things to uncover and learn and discover about human behavior, about the human mind, about physiology and how it all works. And of course, every time it's a new journey to explore, right? So no case is ever the same. It's just there's certain patterns start to emerge, right? Which I know is kind of where FDN really started. Um, Reed, tell people where they can find more about FDN.
So yeah, fdntraining.com/ageless, or in honor of your program. And I have to say this, Jason, that you're just one of the greatest guys that's come through the FDN program. It was kind of a launching pad for you, but that's what we expect is the thoughtful, caring people who really want to help others use it as a basis, and that's what you've done. I loved being involved in your longevity series, where you went through the blue zones and things. You've done some amazing things,
Well,
Jason.
I
Really
appreciate it. I really do
proud of
appreciate
that.
it. and you definitely gave me the right path to start off on. And I continue to reference FDN. And people ask me, it's still the best course that I can think of when it comes to people trying to work their way into any sort of health coaching or health practitioner role. And it's been fascinating as I've been in various rooms with functional neurologists and functional MDs and very, let's say, qualified and credentialed individuals, and we're taking classes together. And let's just say I'm on par, if not ahead of some of them, because I didn't have as much to unlearn from medical training.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what you mentioned earlier, which was that they were kind of envious of my position because I had more freedom in terms of my practice. I was able to work with people all over the world, whereas they were sort of bound by their licensure, right? So it's even though it's not recognized like a medical doctor or some of these degrees, it's not about that. It's actually about the training that you get and your ability to help people. And so that really became the key for me. And I recognized the value that I had in that certification and the ability to run some tests, right? That's the cool thing too. When you go through FDN training, you now have a certification that allows you to order some of these tests. You know which tests to run. I think you probably even get some special deals. I don't know if that's true or not,
FDS
but
gets
like,
some discounts. I mean, you don't make money on lab work, you make it on your fee for services. And
right. But it's nice
physicians,
to be able to get some discounts on some labs
oh yeah,
and,
yeah,
and
and you can give your clients the very best pricing on things.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of that going on. But it's interesting you mentioned it, that, I was an entrepreneur and developed FDN because it's just what I did. And yet other people are not entrepreneurial and they just want to help.
Yeah.
So they're now working in physicians' offices. And I've had the physicians call me, well, how do I become an FDN?
Yeah.
Because they see the freedom that you mentioned. They're not bound by these algorithms in insurance billing and licensure, standard of care, and things. I mean, our standard of care is as high as anyone's, but we do what's best for the patient, not what's allowed by the system, the algorithms of, again, mostly the diagnosing and treatment model is not as effective. So we're actually outperforming
Yeah.
the diagnosis and treatment model because it's
Absolutely.
so comprehensive. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Reed, thank you so much again
Thank
for
you.
everything that you're doing. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Hey, man, my pleasure.